Well, you have to forgive us, folks. We're having some technical difficulties here, and we're unable to reach Jamie. I know the last time he was seen, he was being chased by a couple of guys with a suspicious-looking Aldi bag. So maybe, Jamie, if you're safe, maybe you can text us in and just let us know. And, of course, our prayers, as always, are with Jamie T. Murphy. So, Steve, this week we were reading a book. I recommended it to you. You gracefully decided to take on the task of reading it. It is one of my favourite books. Atomised is Michel Hoellebecq's bleak but darkly comic 1998 novel about loneliness, sexuality, existence, and the collapse of meaning. The novel is framed as an historical document written by a future post-human species, looking back on the final decades of ordinary humans. So, Steve, this book is actually classed as science fiction, and like much great science fiction, it feels prophetic because many of its fears have now truly become mainstream.
I didn't really see it as a work of science fiction. I saw it almost as a work of historical fiction, and sometimes it was written so realistically, I thought it was just simply a history with fictional characters in it.
Hoellebecq often blurs autobiography with fiction, does Steve? I would say even that sometimes he weaponizes that. What do you think?
I don't think he weaponizes it. I think basically he told me things that I had experienced and I had seen in my own life going back to the 60s and 70s. Mainly he was providing insight. And he was telling the truth about the way things have sort of de-evolved, you might say.
Yeah, and it may be that you haven't read some. I know I've read his whole catalogue at this stage.
Well, he talked about something called metaphysical mutation. I thought that was very true. He described it through one of his characters, Michel. His metaphysical mutation is something brought about by modern science: individualism, narcissism, malice, and desire. Love is doomed.
Yeah, and I guess Hoellebecq believes the sexual revolution did not create freedom equally. It created winners and losers. It created status competition. It created loneliness, and it commodified relationships in some manner.
Oh, I agree with that completely. It just the two main characters, Bruno and Michel, are each sort of kind of just shuttled off someplace in their childhood, and they never really recovered from it. And I could really relate to their struggles quite a bit.
I guess Bruno sees sex as being hierarchical, while Michel completely withdraws from those type of relationships.
Well, I have a friend in Wales, Gemma June Howe, and she wrote a novel a couple of years back called The Crazy Truth. And in her book, she talks about how the default model for humans is chimpanzees, where there's male dominance and aggression resolves disputes. But there's an alternative model, which is the bonobos, which are matriarchal and egalitarian, and basically sex resolves aggression and disputes. And I thought of this reading Atomized because it seems to me like Michel is much more in line with following the way of the bonobos, but Bruno gets sort of caught into a cycle of violence and brutality. And you know what they say about victims, they often evolve or turn into perpetrators as well. And so he's fighting back against the world that's showing him its unfriendliness and violence. So they go in different pathways, you might say.
I think that Janine represents a generation that pursued freedom without any sort of responsibility. And one of the big criticisms of Hoellebecq, one of many criticisms, is that he's misogynistic. But I don't think it's misogynism, and I don't think it's anything to do with being anti-woman. I think it's actually anti-detachment that Hoellebecq is showing through here.
It is anti-detachment, and Hoellebecq seems to me he's calling out people who behave badly, whether they're men or women. And Janine, in particular, the character who happens to be Bruno and Michel's mother, just pays little attention to each of them, and not only doesn't pay attention to her kids. She doesn't even seem to pay attention to anybody but herself as she moves through life. And detachment is a pretty good word, taken to the extreme in her case.
Well, you're listening to the Red Book Show on Wexford New People's Movement Radio, and myself and Steve Unicky are discussing Atomised by Michel Hoellebecq. So, Steve, do you think Hoellebecq predicted the emotional consequences of ranking human worth through desirability in much the same way that Chuck Palahniuk later predicted the political consequences in Fight Club? I mean, we now have, but both of these men wrote their books at roughly the same time, the late 90s, early 90s. And we now have incels, we have status anxiety, and it seems to me we have a generation of lost men.
I see a lot of truth in that. And one of the things that Hoellebecq does is he's able to take a second look at things, because a lot of times people go through things and they experience them. They don't know even what they're experiencing because they don't have a name for it or they don't have a pattern that they see yet in life. And what Hoellebecq is doing is really intricately showing the emotional impacts on people from a dystopian time.
Absolutely. Tell me about, do you think Atomised, do you think liberated sexuality often becomes competitive, cruel and transactional? Certainly that's what Hoellebecq seems to be getting at to me.
I see that completely, because he talks about this metaphysical mutation idea where people's egos just rise right to the top. And I'm looking here for a particular quote that he had here. Oh, yes. Biology is now the driving force of society, that Bruno, one of the characters, says. And Bruno says that's our idea of heaven. Michel, his half-brother, does not agree. He sees the serpent in the garden as individualism giving rise to the idea of freedom and a sense of self, and most of all, the need to feel one is superior to others. And this is something that's very destructive. You know, I applaud characters like Michel, who can basically look at everyone as an equal and not think of himself as superior, see an ethical standard.
So,
go ahead.
So Michel's psychological survival may be down to his retention of tenderness. Bruno desires love, but expresses himself through resentment and humiliation.
He just doesn't know how to find it. He wants to find it, and I think Michel also doesn't know how to find it either. Michel talks about something called perfect morality, and he admires the Native Americans based on loyalty, courage, and kindness. So I see what Michel, he's got an inner spirit that's driving him. Our ultimate choice is between emitting goodwill or contempt, and Michel shows goodwill to other people.
That's yeah, absolutely. Hoellebecq, he's often criticised for writing pornography. However, I think he writes about sex clinically as he does about death. Modern culture is obsessed with sex, but rarely talks honestly about aging, decay and death. It seems that makes us much more uncomfortable than talking about sex.
Well, what I saw was, he does go into a lot of explicit detail about sex and also like physical decay after death. But I think his purpose was to basically to get us to see beyond those things. This is a profound book.
Absolutely. It seems to be that neither brother truly enters adulthood. They escape, maybe like so many of us these days. Michel escapes into the intellect, Bruno into his compulsive carnal desire. Is that something that's new? Is it something that emerged post World War II, do you think?
Well, I think I'm taking this in a little bit different direction, but I'm looking at the inner psychological torment of these two young men growing up. And Bruno in particular, he meets a woman, and her name is Caroline, Yasserian. And he only has like one one date with her, but just in a single moment, the date goes wrong, and Hoellebecq writes that Caroline Yessian had it in her power to undo all the sadness and humiliation of his childhood, and he came to see this one date as a defining moment of his life. Now, some people would see that was kind of like freaky, that something like that would become so important, but I completely understand this myself.
Hoellebecq often uses religious imagery to heighten his premise that modernity destroyed spiritual structures, but left us with nothing of meaning to replace them.
I really see a lot of that religious imagery too. And at one point, Janine and David are basically presented as, I think, the evil twins of Atomised. Janine initiates David at a commune, and as a result, David spins into evil. And Annabelle, who is Michel's first girlfriend, she had a fall from grace because she slept with David, and she could not move herself to comfort Michel in his time of grief. I saw this as very symbolic, like she was unable to enter the gates of Eden because she had been thrown out, and she couldn't even enter the gates of Eden to comfort Michel when his grandmother died, his significant other person in his life.
We're having a few technical difficulties here tonight, but we're also having a few Wally difficulties, because I should have said at the start of this that there would be major spoilers ahead. So if you haven't read Atomised, and I would advise that you do, maybe you shouldn't be listening to this discussion. Also, we just have another text message in. Is Wally's beard real? Because I swear I've seen him on late night premium chat lines on Channel 4, shaking a phone, looking for people to call in. Well, thanks for that, listener. My beard is quite real, and I haven't been let on Channel 4 since that incident took place. But thanks for that. Keep sending your messages in on WhatsApp, 086 322 0546. Back to Atomised by Hoellebecq. And Steve, one of the most interesting parts of Hoellebecq is his criticism of 60s liberation movements in Atomised, is that collective freedom actually became radical individualism.
Yeah, and that destroyed all kinds of relationships. I would say that there's something that we really, really need in all of our lives, and that is to get recognition from other people. And for example, Bruno thinks about his son Victor, and he says this: I love that kid more than anything in the world, but I have never been able to acknowledge him. And look up the meaning of to acknowledge. It means to recognize the truth, existence, or reality of something or someone. So another word using that definition is to confirm. What does it mean to confirm a person? It means to be their witness. We need someone else to be our witness. Now, we need someone else to see us so we don't feel invisible. We wander the world looking for someone who can do this for us if no one has ever done it for us before. And Bruno and Michel each had parents who didn't do that for him. You see, we can all see ourselves by looking into a mirror, but that's not the same as having another person in our lives see us for who we are.
That's beautiful, Steve. We're just about to get on to the really sexy part now, where Steve talks about his time in the communes in France in the 70s. But before that, we have another text message in from Southeast Radio's John Moynihan, who's tuned in and enjoying the show so far. The best of luck to you all with the new initiative. Thanks very much, John. And John, of course, is on every Saturday morning on Southeast Radio.
Thank you, John.
On professional radio while we're here in the bunker. But thanks, John. And always a great supporter of local writers, local businesses, and local people in Wexford. Thanks, John. So, Steve, here we go. Maybe 1975 was around the time when Western society stopped believing in a better future. You know, we got neoliberalism, which led to Reaganism and Thatcherism. We started to see, I suppose, untruths in the media. And we had a lot of loss of faith in institutions. It was shortly after Watergate, and we had emotional isolation developing.
Yeah, it's all coming at the same time, and we moved as a world. I mean, I'm generalizing a lot. You know, you always got to be careful not to overgeneralize, but a lot of people in the early 70s imagined a future that was going to be more prosperous, more fair, more just, even happier. And I think somewhere along the lines in the 1970s, and Hoellebecq gives 1974 and 75 as sort of like the watermark or the time when things shifted. But things began to shift, and all of a sudden it became more and more difficult to imagine a future that was going to be happier, more prosperous, and more just. And I saw this happen through my own eyes. The economic decline, the psychological sort of depression that came over people, and the fear of losing jobs and livelihoods. It's all kind of came fast and furious at the same time.
Tell us about your time in the communes in the night.
I don't really want to overplay that or anything, but the fact of the matter is I was hitchhiking through France in 1978, and I ended up in La Rochelle, which was on Bastille night of all nights, and I didn't speak any French whatsoever, and some guy dropped me off after riding for hours from La Rochelle. It dropped me off there, and man, oh man, it was scary, and I just went through the whole night not sleeping a wink, and I sat up in the early morning time, and I met these people. They were very friendly to me. They said, "Come on, we're having breakfast." And so I went in there, and these rowdy, drunken people were having breakfast, but they were so friendly. And but after about a half hour, I decided I needed to move on, so I started hitchhiking down the road. And then one of them came by in their car, and they picked me up. And I ended up hanging out with these people for weeks. And they were from Cholet, which was a small provincial town in the west of France, you know, inward from the sea a little bit. And I became very close friends with them. Now, in Atomised, Hoellebecq writes about a place called Lieu de Changement, like it's a real place. I thought it was really fascinating because he has this commune set up just outside of Cholet. And I thought, I've been there, and I could see the impact of this place myself with my own eyes. And the values that were there in Cholet that I saw was just like Bakunin said in the book, I am free when all men and women around me are free. And that seemed to be the basic idea. And these people were actually quite happy and carefree. Some of them were sort of rebellious. Some of them were just filled with anger. It was a wild group, and it was fascinating.
Brilliant. This is fascinating stuff, Steve. But I know we have time constraints.
Yeah.
The post-human society. As we get to the end of the book, real spoilers coming up now. As we get to the end of the book, we discover that there's actually a post-human society that is telling this story from the future. And I guess, in my view, this post-human society aren't human anymore, but it's left up to the reader to decide that the transhumanism envisioned by people like Ray Kurzweil and Peter Thiel, in my opinion, is not salvation of humanity or even immortality for the elite, as some conspiracy theorists would claim. It's extinction. It's the end of everything that makes us good, makes us real, makes us worth.
Well, I think two of the things, they're basic things, right? But two of the things that make us human are our mortality and our realization of our mortality and our ability to love other people. And if those two things are going to go by the boards, I don't know what value there is left in an individual person's life or what vibrancy is left in a society. And I was fascinated at the ending here because he seems to speculate about a society in transition. There were people who were basically had achieved immortality, and I don't think that this process of achieving immortality was cheap, super expensive, and probably billionaires were the only people that could be immortals. And I don't imagine them being very gentle with the rest of society and gently letting this species called human beings die off, and they replaced us. I think it would have been a lot more of a brutal process. So those are my scattered thoughts about the ending.
Really, really good, Steve. Atomised will leave you thinking late into the night. Like any good work of existentialism, as it suggests that modern society has sacrificed meaning and the things that make us human for abundance and simulation. That you are your iPhone more than your thoughts. That you are your social media outrage more than your actions. And I think that's a really important message for us to be left with by Hoellebecq.